Big happenings in the Big Ten. We saw them in week 6. Expect them to show up here in week 7 with a slate of excellent games to look forward to. Corey Brad and myself breaking down Big Ten football with all of you. Leave your comments and questions there in the chat. We will post the link to give us a call as well. Catch Corey's work, of course, at From the Hawkeye at the Store, covering Iowa football as the Hawkeyes look forward to a trip to Wisconsin to take on the rival Badgers. Corey, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, this was a fun week this past weekend. A lot of close games, some not so close games, and surprises without question. And then this next week, you and I were just talking about it before we hit the live button. There are a number of really good matchups, including one that I'm intrigued that will take place out in Eugene. So good slate. I'm anxious to have you ask me about Penn State and UCLA.
That's where I'm headed right now. So we will look forward to week 7, but looking back at week 6, and certainly I did a postmortem. I posted a video on the possible plight of one James Franklin, and about 12,000 people were interested in it. So that's posted if you would like my take on Penn State and James Franklin, and of course took your calls after Saturday's games. But I would love to get your perspective on this Penn State situation, because 24 points is a big deal in terms of an upset. We don't see that a lot, but it will happen throughout a college football season a few times. So it's not so much the point spread itself. It's that UCLA was this atrocious coming into this game. I can't imagine that there's going to be a team that we could find in history that has lost a game in which it was a 15-point favorite, losing by 25 points, and then turning around a few weeks later as a 25-point favorite or underdog and winning that game against a team that was supposed to win the national championship. And so it's just two programs and teams that are supposed to be in just complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And Penn State has so much to play for, and they go out to LA and lay an egg.
Yeah, it's hard to explain. I heard one of your callers, I think his name was CJ, called in Saturday night, and I happen to agree with a lot of what CJ had to say. On the magnitude of the upset. Somebody on your show said that they thought it was one of your callers, one of your Michigan guys, called in and said that they thought it was maybe the biggest, one of the all-time greatest upsets in college sports or college football, and right up there with Appalachian State and Michigan. And let's pump the brakes here, okay? And let me explain why. And I don't care about point. The point spread is what the point spread is. It's a huge upset, right? Nobody's debating that. What I have an issue with is taking it further than that. It does, no question, it affects the season as it should. It affects Penn State's outlook on the rest of the year. But there's a couple of factors to weigh here. A, let's not forget where we projected UCLA preseason. You and I both said if there was a team that might be able to take a 2 to 3 game win jump forward, it would be UCLA. Then we looked at the schedule and we said, okay, probably not. Then they came out, took several dumps to start the year, and said, okay, they're crap. But that doesn't take away from the fact that they have a guy who was a Heisman candidate quarterback last year that everybody chose to write off because he made himself look like a moron by going into the portal the way he did, demanding money, ends up at UCLA. They were being coached by a guy who I think had no business being a Power 4 head coach, in Deshaun Foster. So the point is, you have a team that still has Big Ten level talent. You have a location where the game is played that's 3 time zones away from Penn State. You also have a quarterback who is, I think, an NFL quarterback. I mean, I still, watching him Saturday, I'm like, this guy's an NFL quarterback. He reminds me of Deshaun Watson. Okay. A lot of there's a reason why he thought, as dumb as it was in hindsight, there's a reason why he thought he could play the leverage game with the Volunteers, because he had established himself as one of the best gunslingers in the country, and he's dual threat. So all that being considered, you add on the fact that they got rid of their coach. That can go one of two ways, right? Sometimes teams just totally tank, and sometimes a team rallies behind their interim head coach their interim offensive coordinator, their interim defense coordinator, whatever the case may be, and pulls a rabbit out of their hat. And that's a pretty big, morbidly obese rabbit that they pulled out of a mega hat on Saturday. But I'm just like, I hope you get where I'm coming from on this. I just think we need to realize it's a massive upset, but understand the factors that contributed to it. Appalachian State had no business beating Michigan on that first ever Big Ten Network televised game. No business. Did not have the talent. No, those circumstances are totally unique to UCLA this past weekend. So I just, now what Penn State does this weekend against Northwestern, we'll follow that. I think they'll beat them handily. And then, of course, they come to Kinnick the following week. And if they lose one more, they're out, right? They're out of the playoff race because even a 9-3 Penn State team with a loss to UCLA is not going to get them in. But I will be curious to see what UCLA does the rest of the way. I just think we need to understand this doesn't mean that Penn State's some crap team. This doesn't mean that UCLA, like UCLA earned that game Saturday. They jumped on them early. And the other factor here is like, we got to realize what happens when a team falls behind early, especially on the road. Now, there was nobody in that stadium. I've never seen the Rose Bowl so empty. But when you fall behind early, this applies to any team at any level of sports. You fall behind early as the favorite. You give the underdog life and belief. And it's exactly what happened with Iowa State and Cincinnati. Yes, Cincinnati was a 1.5-point favorite, but Iowa State was still that team with a little 14 or whatever it is written next to their name. They were still the ranked team. You go on the road to Cincinnati, you give up a couple of early scores, and it's 3, then it's 4, and all of a sudden you're playing behind the 8 ball. Penn State UCLA was a different game in the second half. Penn State, that's why Penn State nearly came back. Iowa State Cincinnati, different game in the second half. So I just think we need to realize that horrible half, things can snowball in that scenario when you're on the road. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Appalachian State, Michigan was in Ann Arbor, right?
Yes.
Okay. So factor there as well, regardless of point spread. Very unfortunate for Penn State. And I just don't know that we need to blow it out of proportion like people have. Massive upset, though, no question.
So this is another dimension to this upset, however. If you're just taking football ability, so much of what you played out was the logistics of the game, meaning where it was played, the time zones traveled, and then also the football ability of these two teams. So Penn State's, from a football standpoint, they are one of the most talented teams in the country. We had somebody on here tell us that they were the most talented team in the Big Ten the last few weeks. I don't agree with that, but let's say they're one of the 4 or 5 best rosters in the country, especially considering the productivity back and the experience. To your point, people are treating UCLA from a talent perspective, roster, like they're Georgia Southern or something. No, if you went through their recruiting rankings, they're bringing in top like 18 to 25 classes. Like their recruiting classes are always fringe top 25 in the country. So they should be a much better football team.
And they got the best, real quick, before all the drama, Iamaleava was considered the best prospect in the country, at least a portal. If that drama hadn't happened, he would have been the number 1 quarterback. Maybe he still was. I don't know what the transfer ratings said, but for him to hop in the portal, if there was not the off-field drama, he was a Heisman level prospect at quarterback in the portal.
Okay.
He was.
This is where we differ. Everything that you stated, what I just restated and beyond that I don't need to restate, I agree with you. Nico Iamaleava was a marginal to decent quarterback last year. He was okay. He was fine. He was a mid-range, and he was only a freshman. So I'm not picking on him, but if you go through his statistics, if you watched him play, if you measure him against other SEC quarterbacks, especially in important games, he racked up a ton of inflated stats against Kent State and those types of teams.
He's also a 5-star quarterback.
Sure. Yeah.
Coming off a solid freshman campaign and a debut against a Big Ten team in Iowa, just, happened by happenstance, where he showed out. So I'm just saying, I guess I'm projecting a little bit, but there's a reason he was a 5-star prospect going to Tennessee.
I'm just saying in a similar vein, when we brought up Fernando Mendoza in the last show, Nico Iamaleava coming into college, a much higher prospect than Fernando Mendoza, but Mendoza, a much more accomplished quarterback at this point. So anyway, I wouldn't state Iamaleava's presence as being as spectacular or accomplished as you did.
Well, well, part of it is he ended up shooting himself in the foot by everything that went down. And then he ends up at a dumpster fire in UCLA. But I think I still think he's got a chance to play in the league in another year as a high draft pick. Because I just think
I'm not discounting any of that. No.
And we saw he went off for like 150 yards on the ground against Penn State. So yeah, like Penn State's rush defense, ridiculous. And Franklin brought that up. I watched both of Franklin's press conferences since Saturday. Just to kind of get a read on him. And I have a hard time getting a read on him because he's so odd in general, I think. But like, you got to give some credit to having a guy like Iamaleava who can run the ball like he does. And I just think Penn State went out there, and I don't know if there were what day they got out there, if there were distractions being in LA, who knows? But I just think it sometimes one bad quarter, and it's a really bad start, really bad quarter, can easily turn into what we saw Saturday. It doesn't happen very often, though, because you have great coaches in this sport at this level, but it can. And so I guess my point is I would not be surprised to see Penn State bounce back and maybe get to. I don't think they're gonna beat Ohio State, but in response to the question in the chat earlier about who was it from? One of these it was Troy. No, it was Steve wanted me to expound upon. I'm assuming Steve's an Ohio State fan. Can I elaborate on Ohio State not being as dominant as you expected? I haven't watched tons of Ohio State football this year. I'm just going basically based on box scores and final scores. Like I'm used to Ohio State scoring more than 14 points, even against the likes of Texas. I'm used to them beating, Washington, running away with that game before halftime, and they didn't do that. I'm not used to Ohio U, although that's a good MAC team, kind of challenging Ohio State for a while. Everything's relative. Not as dominant as I expect does not mean I don't think they're dominant. I still think they probably are the favorites right now to win the national title, but I don't know that they're as dynamic at quarterback. They got Jeremiah Smith, really good as a wideout, but boy, they've had phenomenal wideouts. Think of all the guys in the league now that are from Ohio State, running backs, tailback. So anyways, that's what I meant by that comment.
So the dimension of this situation with Penn State and UCLA that is different than other upsets that we would bring up that are historic, like Stanford USC comes to mind. Jim Harbaugh's first year at Stanford, they're a 41-point underdog to Pete Carroll's USC team, and they pull off an upset. What makes this different is this is not like if Ohio State went out, well, not this week, like if they would have lost to Minnesota. Minnesota was a 24-point underdog. They would have this would have been some isolated game. We would have all been scratching our heads like, what the heck's going on? But Ohio State just won a national championship. I think people would be relatively confident that, okay, we would need to see this again to think that there's something wrong. They're okay. They'll be fine. Maybe they're not quite as good as we thought they were. But this Penn State thing has been building up to this. It's like we're talking about a program that has done everything right outside of beating elite teams. So what's very odd about it is they had this ridiculous, I'll have to go back and count. At one point, I had the number in my head of consecutive wins in the Big Ten, not named Ohio State and Michigan. Like they'd won 40 some consecutive games against everybody else in the Big Ten. This is what they do. They beat all the bad teams and all the mid-tier teams and even all the pretty good teams. They win all those games. That's what they've done. James Franklin can't beat the elite teams. That's what we were waiting for. And for this to come out of nowhere when there's already this narrative that he's not on the hot seat in regards to, well, maybe he is now, but he wasn't considered on the hot seat per se, but more from a make or break. We're all in this season, chips to the middle of the table. This is the team that can do it. And this happens. That's more of the historical upset perspective that I put on it.
Yeah. By the way, Daniel Henry in the chat. Ohio State 600 yards. Ohio Bobcats 150. It was no challenge. It was 13-9 in the third quarter. Give me a break. So, anyways, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. That's the dominant stat. It was 13-9 against a MAC team in the third quarter. So, regardless, yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I can see it from that perspective. I also see it from the perspective of we've not seen them lay an A. I think people were, like, to your point, were so pent, especially Penn State fans, so pent up, no pun intended, pent up with anticipation for them to get over that hump and be this elite team that's a national contender. And now it's so obvious, just with a lot of people, that they're not. And now it's like, oh, they not only fell out of that conversation, they're actually crappier than they have been. So I think that's where a lot of that frustration comes from. And so I agree with you on that note. I guess I'm looking at it more from the perspective of, I don't know that Saturday proves to me that they're not the Penn State they have been. So I wasn't convinced that they were the Penn State people thought they'd be preseason. And then I saw them lose at home to Oregon in overtime. And I'm like, okay, it's a really good team, but I still think Oregon's better. And I think Ohio State's probably better. The good news for Penn State, and this should be good news. This is the good news here. Some people might look at it as bad news because it's an opportunity for them to play themselves out of the college football playoff. But if you're James Franklin, you get an opportunity to shut up a lot of people. Just go beat Ohio State. Just go beat Ohio State. If they do, well, no, I'm just saying if they do, then, like, in general, assuming they don't trip up somewhere else, and they could, they got Iowa here in a couple of weeks in Kinnick at night. But if they don't trip up to anyone else, they're going to be right back in the playoffs and be maybe a favorite to win. They got a lot of talent. It's not like they just fired Franklin. So they're, just like I say with Iowa, it's probably, maybe it's less reasonable for Penn State because they have Ohio State in the schedule, but they're not out of the playoff race yet. Preseason, people would have probably said Ohio State, Penn State was a pick'em. Is that game in Columbus or Happy Valley? Columbus. Yeah, that makes it more difficult. So I don't know. That I'm a let's wait and see guy instead of jumping to conclusions. It's alarming. It's disturbing. I thought it was interesting, the tenor at Penn State's press conference with James Franklin this week. And there were some pretty pointed questions from the media to James Franklin. And I thought Franklin, again, I think he's sort of an odd listen. I don't think he was really disrespectful to any of the questions. I thought he addressed them as best he could, but it's clear he's playing some damage control right now. He's just got to avoid this becoming more than it already is. Like, this is right. 2 losses is like, okay, now we've just no margin for error. Move on. I don't know that you bury the tape. You probably do. If there's a time where you bury the tape, it's probably from this past weekend. And just move on. And Northwestern's not a very good football team. You and I were saying last hour, like, if they lose to Northwestern this week, is there a possibility perhaps he gets fired on the spot? I mean, I don't know. It'd be one of those shocking things, but we were talking about Ryan Day being on the hot seat prior to the playoff last year, and they go out and won a national title.
So again, I don't typically, like you, jump the gun. I'm a wait and see kind of guy. Like, okay, we sat through this, and you and I had these conversations in front of everyone just a couple of weeks ago after upon the aftermath of 63-10 Indiana over Illinois. Oh, Illinois, they're trash. They can't play with anyone. USC is going to annihilate them. Indiana is going to annihilate Iowa because people are taking one game and blowing it out of proportion. It's like people have never watched sports before. So I don't want to take this to that degree by any stretch, but I just think that there's a lot riding on this season, and this season is unto itself. However, the whole Penn State narrative goes back to what they have failed to accomplish for years and years and years. And I think that's also kind of weighing on this entire situation and the outlook of this team. And they do have a trip to Iowa. They do have Indiana. They do have Nebraska, and they've got Ohio State. And that's a lot to ask to thread that needle.
Yeah, no, it is. No, they've created no margin for error. I think right now, if Iowa played Penn State tomorrow and Mark Gronowski was healthy, maybe Iowa's a 1-point underdog, 2-point underdog. I'm not good at predicting these lines, Mark, but I don't think Penn State would be favored by all that much. coming to Kinnick, especially at night. So that's why I keep telling Iowa fans, like, they get all these difficult opponents, almost all of them at home. Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, all at home. Unfortunately, they dropped one of those already. So, yeah, it's just going to be a test of that locker room. That was discussed this week at Franklin's press conference. Are those guys willing to stick together? Because, yeah, now it's less of, maybe I shouldn't say less about talent, but in a sense, it is less about talent and more about the team aspect of being together and staying locked in.
And this is what Lisa Sims is speaking to right here. And none of us can answer this question. None of us can get into the hearts and minds of 18 to 22-year-olds at Penn State to know, are they going to fall apart or are they going to rally and be dangerous? Can't answer that. We'll see how good James Franklin is at part of his job. This is a major part of his job, to be able to rally this football team. Now, we had our guy Marty Leap on last night, and he claims that by watching this game, he did not think that Penn State was invested. Like, they just weren't into it. And he's a smart football guy, and that's obviously his team, and he just thinks that now, I would understand that after this game, after the UCLA game, that they would play like that going forward, thinking that their season's done, but that they would have played like that after the Oregon game, where they lost by the slimmest of margins and still only had one loss. It's hard for me to believe that they would have approached the game like that.
Yeah, and I am not, up to speed on Penn State like Marty obviously is, but I watched the game Saturday and I didn't see a team that wasn't trying. I saw a team that, just like we've talked about, you get in a difficult position early and you probably start playing tight. And this was one of those games at this point of the schedule where you least expect a first quarter to go the way it did, and it just to me it's just a cumulative effect. Then it's a snowball effect at that point. So, and how about Washington, Mark, going out to Maryland, and Maryland blows a 3-score lead. I mean, we talk about Maryland every year. I talk about them always being undefeated through September, or at least it seems like they are. And then they just find ways to self-destruct, and talk about a program that doesn't appear to care much about their football program, because they just keep Loxley there no matter what. Mediocre, 6-6, 5-7 at best.
Well, I'm going to defend.
What are you going to defend?
To a certain extent.
What are you going to defend?
They had one bad season. He won 3 consecutive bowl games before that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're 6-6, 7-5. That's what they are.
8-5. He's turning out 8-5 seasons, and then they have a bad season last year. We'll see if they put up with it.
Well, they also play a lot of nobody. They also play crap teams in the non-conference. They've scheduled the likes of, I want to say, like Virginia, and so they cakewalk their way to 3 wins every year, right? They cakewalk their way to 3-0 every year.
At times.
Well, no, not at times. What's the last good Power 4 opponent that they've played in the non-conference?
They played Syracuse, Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech?
I'm not talking about Virginia Tech right this second. I'm talking about Virginia Tech like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm talking about Syracuse like 4 or 5 years ago.
All right.
So,
okay, well, regardless.
But yeah, they played nobody this year. They played nobody last year. Absolutely. I tried to drive that into the ground, that between Indiana, Maryland,
Penn State,
Rutgers, and Penn State, they should be embarrassed for not playing anyone. Yeah.
And but yeah, impressive comeback by Washington. I believe so. I'm not a betting guy, but as I've said many times, but I was 7-5 against the spread this past week. What were you, Mark, in total?
7-11.
Ooh,
I had a bad week.
You did.
I missed 3 games by a half a point. I had 3 of those half-point losses.
How did our other guys do? I haven't looked at the spreadsheet.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I've not looked at it. Yeah. Like Kentucky gets 20.5. They lose by 21. I had 3 of those.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I thought, because Washington were they a favorite heading into that Maryland game?
Yes, by 6.5.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had Maryland covering the number, which they did, correct?
Yep. I'm still 66-41.
Yeah. Those are still good numbers.
119-24.
But that means I'm catching you,
Game's not
Mark.
right.
That means I'm catching you.
Okay.
We don't pick as many games, but my numbers they got to go a long way to catch you. But anyways,
This is a great slate of games.
it is a great slate of games. I mean, I mentioned to you before jumping on here. Nebraska at Maryland is fascinating. Talk about two programs that traditionally in the last 5 to 10 years find ways to lose. Maryland found a way to lose last week. We didn't talk about Nebraska beating Michigan State. That basically was exactly what Vegas thought it would be. Vegas is pretty good at predicting these things. Michigan, USC. It's a weird night slate because nobody's going to be watching Purdue at Minnesota. I think that game could be really close over on Big Ten Network, but you got Michigan at USC, Iowa, Wisconsin at the same time, and Ohio State at Illinois. That's like with this Indiana-Oregon game, like what is the spread on Ohio State, Illinois?
I believe it is 14.5.
That's, I mean, I don't want to say it because, again, they know what they're doing. I was going to say that's nuts.
You think that's too high?
The way Ohio State's play, I mean, yeah, I know they're coming off a 40-point win, but the way Ohio State's played, like it was brought up earlier, well, they're better defensively. Well, they may be better defensively, but that probably means they're going to play somewhat closer on the scoreboard. We've seen that. That's played itself out so far.
Their defense, my goodness.
Yeah, their defense. I know your goodness, but the bottom line is they have played.
They're giving up 5 points a game.
They have played. Yeah, I know, but they're also going on the road, and they're playing teams closer this year in general. So maybe 14.5 is, that seems bigger than it really is, right? It does. It seems bigger than it really is. And so if I had to really break it down, I'd probably be real close to that. But and hey, UCLA Michigan State's going to be a fascinating one. What does that? You got to be happy for Skipper, right? And that coaching staff. Like I said, there is a facet. I don't think we're talking about that aspect of things enough. The fact that they were able to play for their interim coach and their interim coordinator. And then, I mean, how will Penn State bounce back against Northwestern? Iowa's trip to Wisconsin's a closer spread than I would have anticipated, but Iowa could be down Mark Gronowski. Wisconsin's likely down Billy Edwards again and their other quarterback. And we got a super chat coming in from Adam.
We've got a super chat, and we've got a caller before you need to take off. So let me get my act together here. Adam says this. Mark, Drew Aller, Arch Manning, and DJ Lagway should be professional wrestlers. They cannot play football and should be ashamed. At this point, Miami looks like the best team in the country. Your thoughts? Well, I do not know anything about the wrestling skills of Arch Manning, Drew Aller, and DJ Lagway. Cannot speak to that. I do know that they are talented quarterbacks with issues, all three of them this year. So I will not speak specifically to mechanics and technique. I have talked about Drew Aller, Arch Manning, and DJ Lagway, all three of them actually ad nauseum through various instant analysis and so forth. So yes, they're all struggling. DJ Lagway played really well, though, this past weekend in Florida's win against Texas. Arch Manning looks like a different guy every time he takes the field. Like every drive, he's different. He's an NFL first rounder one drive, then the next drive, he's all over the place.
He's a second year guy, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what underclassmen are. I mean, I know that he's projected as this, he's a 5-star legacy kid, but I think people need to give some grace to young kids. They're going to have some ups and downs when they're 18 or 19,
and as a complete football team, I do agree with the statement that Miami looks like the best team in the country. I don't know who the best team in the country is. I tend to believe it's Ohio State, but Miami's probably playing the best against the best competition. They've already played Florida, Florida State, Notre Dame, and South Florida.
Yeah, I think if I was coming out with rankings right now, maybe not rankings based on resume, which is I think the way that rankings should be made, like what you do, but if it was just who I think is the best team, I might have Oregon number one, just because they've been a little bit more impressive in their wins. I'm not trying to knock on Ohio State, but they've been a little bit more dominant in their wins. Neither team has played a real tough schedule at this point, although Oregon did go and beat Penn State in Happy Valley whiteout. Maybe the toughest place to play, toughest environment in the country.
Michigan Man is here. Michigan Man, what's going on?
Yeah, Ohio State's going to blow out Illinois, man. That's going to be at least 3 scores.
Well, Vegas does not agree with you, so.
Yeah, well, guess what? Vegas is wrong. I'm telling you right, look, man.
All right.
Look,
you sound like all those Indiana people that were telling me that Indiana was going to go beat Iowa by 4 scores. Like, there's no chance. Well,
Michigan Man knows his stuff. He's Michigan Man. He has no reason to be rooting for Ohio State.
No, here's the thing, though, man. Here's the thing. Indiana, now look, under Kursignetti, they've been pretty good, but they don't got that track record that Ohio State Ryan Day does. And honestly, until I can see a team move the ball on their defense, until I can see that, they're going to be winning by 3 scores. I mean, because they're going to score. And Illinois' defense is not that good. It's okay. It's not that. It's not going to. To me, it's not going to be stopping Ohio State's offense.
I don't think.
Consecutive drives. So the way I see it going is they're going to shut down Illinois' offense for the most part, and maybe it's a closer game in the first half, but they're going to end up winning by at least 3 scores. I'm telling you right now.
I don't think Illinois' defense is good either. What I will say though is, it is in Champaign, and we have seen Ohio State struggle to score the ball at times, right? Like I mentioned, the first half against Ohio, struggled against a good Texas defense. So, I mean, maybe this past weekend was proof that that explosive aspect of that offense is back now, Mark. I mean, 42 against Minnesota. So you could be right. I would be surprised by that, just because I would, again, I tend to go back, even though Ohio State typically has an explosive offense under Ryan Day's leadership. Typically, Illinois plays better defense with Brett as their head coach than what they've showed. So I would like to think that they'll figure it out. And again, I don't want to throw out the game against Indiana, but I sort of have in a sense, because that was such an anomaly. I think that's going to be a really good game. I don't think if I had to pick right now, I'd probably take Illinois against the spread, probably. But I think the spread is that, now that I think about it more, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's probably closer to what it should be. But we'll see.
Yeah, look, if they want to keep it close, which again, I don't think it's going to happen, but if they want to keep it close, they got to do what teams have done that have had some success against Ohio State, which is run strictly zone defense, keep everything in front of you, and keep stop the run game. You got to at least slow down the run game and force them into long passing situations. But again, that's you got to have the horses to do that. And I don't think Illinois got the horses to do that. That's just my personal
question. Let's not forget that a couple weeks ago, when Illinois got throttled by Indiana, they were down 6 of their top 7 DBs. I haven't watched. I mean, I watched a little bit of Illinois and their win over Purdue. Watched a little bit of their win over USC, just the fourth quarter. I don't even know, are those DBs back? Do we know the status on those guys? Because I think that's probably a pretty big storyline and pretty big reason why they gave up 63 to Indiana. So I don't know. That's probably my biggest question mark, is the health of that defensive backfield against, of all teams, Ohio State.
How was Illinois against the run this year?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. I know that they couldn't stop Duke in the first half. Duke looked like a much better football team than Illinois in the first half.
Illinois is, let's see, they are not, I'm not seeing them in the top 50 in rush defense. Well, I mean, they're giving up. I mean, Michigan, man, they've given up 63, 32, and 27 respectively. And the 27 came against.
Yeah, this game, I'm going to tell you right now, guys, this game's not going to be close, bro. This game's not going to be close. Because, look, you got to have, with Ohio State, you got to, bare minimum, you got to be able to slow down their offense somewhat. And if they can't slow down Duke and all these other teams, it's going to be a hard sell telling me they're going to slow down Ohio State. And we already know what Ohio State brings on the defensive side of the ball. And Illinois is not, they're not a juggernaut on the offense. So I think the game's overhyped. I felt similarly about the Ohio State Washington game. People were talking about, look out, Washington might. I was like, nah, Washington's not going to do nothing. They're really not. It's the same thing. Here's the thing about Ohio State, guys. Ohio State, in retrospect, and you guys might disagree with this, they're going to end up having one of the easier schedules in the country. They are. They really are. Texas is still a decent win, but Texas is nowhere near what we thought they were. Penn State, I'm not even sure what they are. But outside of that, and they always have trouble Michigan, but outside of that, they really play nobody, in my opinion. That's really of any challenge to them. So it's like they're going to coast the rest of the way, in my opinion.
There are Illinois 62nd in the country in rush defense, so not a good number. Of all people, Brett Bielema can't be happy with that. I would say again, if and I'm not a betting man, but if you put this on our 12-pack, Mark, which I'm guessing you will, this will be a game where I'm going to have to really do research, because I do think, based on the little I know about that Illinois defense, the health of that defensive backfield to me is the biggest storyline. If they're down 4 or 5 of those top 7 still, then yeah, I don't see how they're going to. They've had issues stopping Purdue and USC. They're not going to stop Ohio State. And I could see in a situation like that it being like, 35-17 or something like that. I could see it play out that way if they're still down everybody. If they're back healthy on the back end, I give them a shot. I give them a shot to at least be competitive in this game at home.
Yeah, I'm going to come out and say, man, you know what? After hearing some of the numbers, this game's going to be over in the second quarter. I'm calling it right now. It's going to be over in the second quarter.
So you don't care about the health of those DBs. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Now, look.
Okay, Sonny says that 6 of the 7 DBs are back, and I'd like to know, were they back last week? Because we don't have it like Illinois' first 3 games were Duke, and yeah, you said Duke had some success, Mark, but they
had a lot of success. They racked up a ton of yardage in that game.
They scored 9 points, though.
19 points.
Okay, 19.
They turned it over 5 times.
And then their other 2 games, I think they gave up 0 and 3 were their point total. So I'm just saying we don't really have a sample size with a healthy defensive backfield if those guys are coming back this week. So
yeah, and I think we're seeing week to week, especially against Minnesota, we're seeing Ryan Day slowly trust Julian Sayin a little bit more. He started to take some deep shots and connect on those last week.
Well, that's what I'm saying too. Like Minnesota, the way they play defense, or the way they play defense in that game, is not how you play Ohio State. Like, for example, on the one now, great play design. They really faked them out with the sweep to Smith, but that you don't play that close up style of defense. You gotta keep people back. Now the problem is most people don't have the proper front 7 personnel to really pull that off, and I don't think Illinois got that personnel. And I don't think they're going to be able to stop the run. And the thing is, if you can't at bare minimum slow down the run, it's going to be a long day because they're going to move the ball. Ohio State with this team is.
We're losing you, Michigan, man. And I think we're going to move on anyway, but we appreciate you being here. All right, Corey, do you need to move on?
Yeah, I do. I appreciate that. Hey, it seems like there's a lot of confident Ohio State fans in the chat to go along with Michigan, man. So we'll see. Like I say, I heard the same thing. I've heard the same thing several times, and I just refer back to context is important. So context is important.
Context is important.
Don't do it.
But let's also understand that this team and this program has been a little different than everybody else in the Big Ten for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's very true. I also saw Ohio State go on the road to Northwestern a couple of years back and really struggle. It's going on the road in the conference is and by the way, the comment about Washington, that game wasn't like that game was turned into a bit of a blowout in the second half. But again,
it's a competitive game.
It was a competitive game.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't quite get the
7-3 at halftime.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, if Sonny's right, which I'm assuming Sonny is, he knows Illinois football. I think they can keep it close, and I think Vegas is closer than than maybe what Michigan Man is saying. Probably closer to, I'd probably say it's more of a 12 to 13 number right now. It's not a number I would be picking against. So
yeah, I'm going to have to think that one over because I think that's, on the edge of what I think this game's going to be. I am not confident either way on that point spread.
And by the way, Steve in the chat, I love what you act like it's nitpicking that I'm agreeing more with Vegas than all these Ohio State fans and one Michigan fan that calls in like, oh yeah, I'm nitpicking because I happen to agree more with Vegas. Like, hear the logic or the lack thereof, please. Anyways, Mark, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate it.
Sir.
From the Hawkeye of the Storm, everyone. Iowa football content there daily. Alec Keyser stopping by from Indiana at the Voice of College Football. Indiana taking on Oregon, of course, in a huge showdown out west at Autzen. And speaking of point spreads, the Ducks 7.5 point favorites in this one. It's about, I guess, where I would have guessed it. Did not give it too much thought. Alec, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I was actually super pumped to talk to Corey. I wanted to start off with a stat for you guys. I know there's a bunch of people in the chat that are pumped to see me. I can see it popping up already, but I got a stat for you, Mark. 18 FBS teams average 7 yards per play or more on offense. 22 FBS teams average or are allowing 4.5 yards per play or fewer on defense. 5 teams are doing both. Indiana and Oregon are 2 of those. I'm excited to talk about this game. Ohio State is 1. Texas Tech is another. And the 5th and final team, Old Dominion.
Yes. And if I'm not mistaken, Old Dominion has played LSU, Oklahoma, Indiana, and
I mean,
a couple other.
I'm just telling you what the stats say, and you can continue to diminish the Old Dominion team, but they just keep on winning. They have a big game this weekend. So,
well, regardless of, yes, they can win all the games on their schedule, and that's a great accomplishment for them. But we're talking about an upper tier Big Ten team taking on Old Dominion.
No, but okay. I do have some thoughts about the spread, and I'm not a huge gambler. I don't know a ton about line movement and things like that, but the line opened at 10.5. It moved down to 7.5. But if you look at any of the books, DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever, the majority of the money is going on Oregon spread. So what that tells me is that big money is moving the line down. And I'm thinking that if that line gets to under 7, gets to 6.5, you'll see it shoot right back up. I'm not fully convinced that the line moved organically. That being said, I don't know if the spread is completely relevant in this game. I'm excited to talk about it, but that's kind of what that line movement tells me, because the money isn't, the public money at least, isn't reflecting the way the line's moving.
Yeah, well, we've got our buddy Steve Merrill from Wager Talk who jumps on with us every week, and he's not a big believer in public money. He thinks basically the public overreacts and really doesn't know what they're talking about generally. And I would tend to agree because I see the comments that are made from the college football public on a regular basis. So I'm not too concerned about what the point spread is either. And this is one of these games where, hey, I think either team winning by 1 point is a statement, is a significant win, is huge. So even though Oregon's supposed to win this game, according to Vegas, opening line by 10.5, and now it's down to 7.5. They win this game by 1 point, I will think no less of Oregon football, unless I think that there were 5 bad calls and Indiana, Fernando Mendoza got knocked out of the game. And there were all sorts of crazy circumstances to lead to an Oregon win. But the winner of this game, to me, has done something, has accomplished something.
Oh, I completely agree. And I would actually say, because I was kind of hearing maybe that this game means less for Oregon and Indiana now that Penn State maybe has played themselves out of the playoff talk or whatever that narrative may be. I would actually argue that Penn State losing makes this game mean more for both teams, because going into the season, like, for example, if you looked at Indiana's schedule, you said, well, if they lose at Oregon, they lose at Penn State. That's probably the strongest 2-loss resume in the country. You're looking at a playoff berth potentially with 2 losses. Now, if this Indiana team is 10-2 with a loss at Penn State, with the way that team looked last weekend, right or wrong, public perception-wise says 10-2 is not good enough to make the playoff. So in terms of public perception, for both teams. I think this game is extremely massive. I think the biggest misconception, though, is that people are going to look at this team and look at Oregon and go, that's a team loaded with NFL talent, and look at Indiana and be like, we saw what they looked like last year against Ohio State. We saw what they looked like against Notre Dame, and they're going to get pushed around in the trenches. And that's just not the case with this game. Indiana is an elite rushing football team. We saw what they were able to do against Iowa. In Iowa, they were still able to run the ball. Oregon gave up 4 yards a carry on 35 carries to Penn State last week. I think we're going to see a very similar game plan for Indiana, and the game's going to be won in the trenches. I think this Hoosier team's going to be able to run the football, and I'm really excited to watch the offensive line and the line of scrimmage because I think Indiana isn't at as much of a disadvantage as people are going to make it seem.
So what would be the outcome of the numbers that you would feel confident Indiana winning this game? If I showed you 150 yards rushing and Mendoza throws it 25 to 28 times and they run it more like 35 times, is that a good formula?
Yeah, 35. I think they run the ball 35, 40 times legitimately. I really do.
And Oregon, from what I remember, bottled up the Penn State running attack fairly well. Obviously, it was a 3-3 game at half, and Penn State really didn't move the ball or do anything significant until late in the game. Obviously, the final score's inconsequential because you get to overtime and then teams are scoring at will. But before that, Oregon, against what was considered to be the best backfield in the country entering the season, performed well. I can pull up the stats. But yeah, that should be quite the battle because that's the one Oregon game where you can really look at like talent and like production against what we're going to see against Indiana.
I also think the other thing I'm looking at is the biggest thing that jumped out to me, and I didn't watch the entire Penn State Oregon game. I've taken in, takes and content, and, you watch the highlights. Penn State didn't sack the quarterback, and they had 1 tackle for loss. If you look at what the strength of this Indiana defense is, and I know they haven't faced an offense as high-powered as Oregon, honestly, not even close. But if you want to talk strictly offensive lines, I mean, Iowa has one of the best offensive lines in the country. We spent 2 weeks ago talking about that was going to be a really important battle. You look at their PFF grades and all that stuff. Indiana's defensive line was able to create a ton of havoc. And so looking at Oregon's offensive line, which might be the best unit in the country, if Indiana is able to get to Dante Moore, disrupt him a little bit, actually get some tackles for loss in the backfield, we don't know what Dante Moore in an Oregon uniform looks like when he's flustered, but I can tell you the dude is calm under pressure. Like the touchdown throw he had in overtime, there was a guy in his face. He just slid right by him and the camera cut was like right on his eyes. And the dude wasn't even dripping sweat. Like it was impressive. So they're going to have to get that dude on the ground. But yeah, I think Penn State had an opportunity to win this football game. They had the ball in overtime and Aller threw a bad pick in the coverage, but I think the stat line is going to have to look very similar to that for Indiana. You look at 35 carries, 139 yards. They're going to have to run the football because if Oregon's able to stop the run without committing extra guys in the box, it's going to be rough for Indiana. Oregon's secondary, while they're young, extremely, extremely athletic. They're really good with the ball in their hands and the linebackers as well. Those guys also look to score when they have the ball in their hands. If Indiana gets forced into obvious passing situations where they're behind the chains and Oregon's able to let those athletes loose, Indiana's like using the silent count and they're able to be timed up, it's going to be rough. It's going to be extremely important for Indiana to be in third and manageable, to be able to use play action. I'm hoping they have a hard count or something planned for this game. But it's if Indiana isn't able to force Oregon into committing more to the run, it's going to be hard to move the ball against that secondary because they're so athletic.
So Indiana on defense has obviously not been challenged by anyone. And the Illinois outcome was shocking from that standpoint because Illinois has scored points against everyone else. Luke Altmaier's having an outstanding season outside of facing Indiana. So you just mentioned Dante Moore. And, that game against Penn State, I came on here and instantly thought and communicated that this was the most important weekend or the most important accomplishment out there for an individual player was Dante Moore playing in his first big game as a college quarterback. He's been around, for those of us who follow recruiting a little bit and know that he was a 5-star and we saw him at UCLA and then he sat behind Dylan Gabriel. It seems like he's been around forever. And he finally, he played all these blowout games that now he finally gets challenged and he comes through in spades. So now Indiana has yet to be challenged on defense because they took care of Illinois. And when I say they have yet to be challenged, that's not because Illinois doesn't have a capable offense. It's because Indiana completely suffocated them. So, what are your concerns / key matchups with Indiana on defense versus Oregon's offense?
Well, aside from really just hitting him, because if you scroll, are you on the box score here?
Yes.
If you scroll down to defensively, you can see the tackle number for Penn State. Like, they weren't in the backfield at all. And when they were in the backfield, they weren't able to make plays. That the third and fourth column, that 0 and that 1 on team totals is your sacks and your tackles for loss. Like you're not going to beat Oregon if you can't get that guy on the ground. Like, if he's able to just stand back there and let those athletes run into space, I know they're a little bit beat up in the receiver room, but like, it's Oregon, man. Like I made this point yesterday, and it sounds like it comes off disrespectfully, but I promise it's not. Like, Dan Lanning has turned Oregon into one of those schools where you just look at the logo and you understand like all those guys are talented. And then you look at the individual talent, who those kids actually are. It's like you kind of understand the way their offense works and things like that. But you can just assume that they have a bunch of really talented guys. I think it would be a disaster for Indiana if they're not able to get to the quarterback, because one of the biggest weaknesses on this defense is their ability to defend the intermediate pass, especially over the middle. You saw when Iowa was able to kind of get the ball moving, Gronowski was very quick to get the ball out of his hands, kind of beating the linebackers right over the head, right over the middle of the field. I don't need to explain to you or the people who watch college football that Oregon is a significantly better offense with much better athletes. And when those kids catch the ball in space in the middle of zones, they're going to do damage with it. So if Indiana is not able to create pressure with their front seven, there's a lot of not a lot of holes in the zone, but there are holes in the zone that are masked by their ability to get to the quarterback. If they can't get him on the ground, you can shred the entire game. It really doesn't matter.
Okay, we've almost arrived at the midway point of the season. Is there anything about this Indiana team that has turned out to be even better than you expected, or it doesn't, at a 50,000 foot view, it doesn't appear as though Indiana has any weaknesses. Obviously, every team has weaknesses, but substantial weaknesses, positional unit weaknesses, anything that stands out. So how has this season progressed compared to what you expected?
I mean, I guess it started off a little slow. You wanted a huge explosion, and we can sit here and debate how good Old Dominion is as a football team. Point of the matter is, like, Indiana should have looked better in that game. Other than take out the first week, and I know you can't do that, but this has been a really impressive football team. They've progressed every week, but not to sound like that guy, but I mean, this is the same football team I thought they were when we first talked 5-6 months ago. Nothing really has surprised me about this team. It's just the fact that they're executing in front of people is really exciting. Validating is almost the wrong word because we're in the middle of a season, right? So it doesn't really matter that much yet. But now I'm really not surprised by anything this team has put on the field. This is exactly what they said they were going to do.
All right.
And then just a couple numbers on the Oregon defense. Oregon has 9 total sacks on the year. They have 22 tackles for loss. If you take out the Indiana State game, which is the one FCS opponent Indiana played, Indiana still has 33 tackles for loss and 11 sacks. Like, this is a defense that gets after the quarterback. They create havoc in the backfield. Like, they don't have the depth and they don't have the name value that Oregon has. And when you strictly because Cignetti hasn't been there long enough to recruit at that level to build that depth. But if you're talking about top level talent, Indiana goes toe to toe with these guys. And if the Indiana players are who we think they are, like Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore are being mocked 1 and 2 in whichever draft you look at. Like, we believe Elijah Surratt's around a number 1 or second round receiver. Like, we believe Omar Cooper is an NFL guy. We believe in the talent of EJ Williams. Like, we believe in Roman Hemby. We believe in the offensive line. So it's like, if these guys are who we think they are, then they're going to have a really good chance to go in and compete. Now, like, Autzen is one of the toughest places to play in the country. You watch the defending national champion go in there last year and lose. So it's like this is the biggest challenge of Indiana's season, but this is also the best team that Oregon has played. So I'm really excited to watch them play football this weekend.
Right, folks. What we know at this point, Alec, is that Indiana's had one big game And you were confident that they would win comfortably, not by 53 points. And Indiana pulled through and obviously backed you up on that one. So everybody head on over to the Indiana channel here at the Voice of College Football, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So we're less than an hour away from Alec and Brad getting together to talk Indiana football, and it's a huge one against Oregon. So everyone, we will drop the link in the chat to the channel so you can head on over after we're done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was on College Football Express with Ryan Winters from the Oregon side. That video just dropped a couple minutes ago. I'm not sure if Ryan's going to be able to make our show or not because he also goes live tonight, but awesome conversation if you're looking for some content on the Oregon side, as well as the Voice of College Football working guys, obviously.
Ryan's awesome. Always
a good
enjoy
dude.
Ryan stopping by here. We've known Ryan for a long, long time. All right, Alec, have a good show tonight.
Appreciate it, Mark. Always appreciate you having me on.
All right. I do apologize to the one caller that has dropped off. They were waiting for quite some time, but we had back-to-back. Obviously, we had a caller before this, and then we had Alec lined up to talk Indiana. So my apologies to whomever that was. Hopefully, you're still listening, that we cannot pick up your call. I did want to respond to this comment by Pit Snipe Husker. I probably lost it here. But Pit Snipe, I get your point when you said that Iowa always plays close games. I lost it. Can't find it. I get your point. Yes, Iowa plays close games against everyone. It seems kind of on their level or below. So they lift up the bad teams to play close with them, rarely blow them out. And then everybody on their level, you know, I'm usually going to lean in Iowa's direction against a Wisconsin or a Minnesota or a Nebraska because look at what they do. They usually win those games and they're razor close. They don't play everyone close. You may want to check out Iowa. Kirk Ferentz is building a pretty sad recent resume against elite competition. It's pretty bad. Like the last two trips to Columbus, 56-10, 35-7. Last two Michigan Big Ten championship games, 42-3, 26-zip. Tennessee bowl game, 35-zip. Last time they played Penn State, 31-zip. Yeah, so Iowa needs to show something against the better teams in the conference. It's been rather ugly. So, yes, Iowa does not play everyone close. All right, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I'll be back to take your calls at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the College Football Show. Thanks for showing up. Please hit the like button on the way out. Please subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. And in the meantime, I'm going to leave this Indiana link in the chat, and you can hear more from Alec and also from Brad on the Indiana show in about 50 minutes. There we go. In the chat, the Indiana channel and the breakdown on the Hoosiers and the Ducks. And I love this schedule in the Big Ten. We didn't even talk USC and Michigan. Nebraska, Maryland, again, Illinois, Ohio State at noon, and this Indiana-Oregon game. It's a loaded schedule in the Big Ten. We should all have fun watching Big Ten football this weekend. And it starts with Rutgers and Washington on a Friday night, and we'll be live after that game here at the Voice of College Football. Otherwise, it's 10 p.m. Eastern Time every night. And when we've got a decent game to watch, we come on after the game. Unless it's a blowout, then we'll cut in sometime in the fourth quarter. So Rutgers, Washington will be here for postgame directly after on Friday. See you tonight at 10 Eastern.